It is a mailbag Friday, but there was maybe one of the most awful takes I have seen on the BYU football program and a prediction for the upcoming season that we must discuss. We're answering your questions as well, and also catching up with BYU tight end Jackson Bowers.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. By way of quick reminder and introduction, this is your original daily podcast focused on all things BYU sports, going on 5 years strong here, doing episodes every single weekday and even sometimes on into the weekend. But a big thank you to all of you for your support of this venture as always. Today's show is brought to you by our new friends at GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We'll tell you a little bit more about them as today's show progresses. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. It is a Mailbag Friday. We do these every Friday here on Locked On Cougars. And there was I don't know how to say this otherwise, like maybe one of those most horrendous takes I've seen in quite some time. And I got 2 or 3 questions about it, asking similar things. Now, those of you who did not see it, there was a piece done by Stewart Mandel in The Athletic talking about just predictions for the Big 12 season. And he laid out how he thought the season was going to go. He actually has BYU finishing in a tie for dead last at 4-8 on the year, 2-7 in the conference. So obviously he's predicting a pretty rough season for the Cougars, not going to a bowl game. But that's not the most egregious thing that he said in that piece. He put out there, he talked about coaches who could be on the hot seat or could be fired. And he had Kalani Sitake. I can't do it without laughing. I apologize. He had Kalani Sitake on that list saying that with Utah's introduction into the conference and BYU going up his level and just the added pressure and the toughness of the schedule, could BYU pull the trigger on Kalani Sitake after year 1 in the Big 12? And I'm just, like I said, oh, geez. No, he's not getting fired after year 1. I'm sorry. Like, I know Stu is a guy that has to put stuff out there, and obviously he's trying to generate reaction, and he probably got his wish because, trust me, it was all over social media. I got 2 or 3 of you sending me questions saying, Jake, what do you make of this? And here's the thing. Kalani Sitake has had his foibles during his time as BYU's head coach. There's no doubt about that. His original staff had some people that were, let's just put it this way, not necessarily as interested in working as hard as they should or upholding the standards that BYU expected him to uphold, and he weeded all that out. He has also dealt with the situation involving one of his absolute best friends in this entire world, in Elisa Tuiaki. He tried to give him the longest leash he possibly could as his defensive coordinator, stepping in at times to help hopefully rectify and right the ship defensively, and ultimately realized, you know what, I got to cut bait, and he made that decision. Kalani is a guy who has ingratiated himself into Brigham Young University, and if they were to pull the plug on him after 1 year in the Big 12 conference, then what in the world is BYU doing in Power 5 football? You've got a guy who grew up a BYU fan, lived the dream of playing for Lavelle Edwards, paid his dues at literally every level of college football. He started at a junior college, worked at Southern Utah, worked at Utah. He's at both the G5 and the P5 level with the Utes. He's worked at every level of football, has seen a lot of good coaches that he's worked for come and go, and he's learned a lot during his time, both as an assistant as well as now as a head coach going into his 8th season at the helm of the BYU football program. If BYU were to pull the plug on a guy like Kalani Sitake after 1 year in the Big 12 conference, something absolutely major would have to come out that I have got nowhere near on my radar. That's the thing. That's how crazy it would have to be. In fact, I am more confident in saying that it's more likely Kalani Sitake gets hired away from BYU than it is that he ever gets fired by BYU. How about that for a take, Stu Mandel? I like Stu. Honestly, I do enjoy reading his work, but there are times that just make me like kind of scratch my head and say, what are you doing, dude? But nonetheless, Kalani Sitake is not getting fired. So thanks to, it was David, Kylie, as well as Carl, who sent in that question. So thank you to all of you for the different. There was, like I said, it was a variation of the same question, but Kalani Sitake is not going anywhere. He will leave BYU of his own volition before he gets fired, it feels like to me. Now, could I be wrong about that 2 or 3, 4 years down the line if BYU puts up 2-10 like seasons? Okay, that would change the conversation. But I'm telling you right now, BYU's coaching staff have had conversations with enough people inside that program that feel fairly confident they can go out and get to bowl eligibility this year. They're not looking like a program that is going to necessarily like come in and fall flat on their face. And like I said, after 1 year, you're going to cut bait after 1 year on a guy like that. No. It's just not happening. Now, the other question that was sent in, this one came in via Ethan. He said, Jake, did you see the updated honor code standards for BYU? I did see that, Ethan. Obviously, some changes. My youngest brother currently attends Brigham Young University, Idaho, up in Rexburg. And I did get a text from him like literally minutes after the announcement came out yesterday that I can wear shorts on campus. And I'm like, good for you, dude. I'm happy for you. I'll tell you right now, I had opportunities. Many of you know that I attended Brigham Young University in Provo, obviously, for my college career. But the thing is, I had opportunities to go to BYU Idaho, and I'll tell you, one of the major reasons I would never consider going to Rexburg was the fact that I couldn't wear shorts. So I'm happy for all BYUI students, but that's beside the point of what we're talking about here. They've updated this, and there's obviously how the honor code is going to be interpreted. Apparently, a lot of the questions with the ecclesiastical endorsement that all students must adhere to is very similar to the temple recommend questions that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints puts out there. They obviously, you were asked if you want to get a temple recommend to go in to temples of the church. But the bigger thing is it clarified some language with regards to hair. And obviously, I don't know how this is going to be enforced. They'd have some clarification. They expect hair to be short. It's supposed to be trimmed neatly. Mustaches are still the thing. I just, for the life of me, why in the world is a beard not okay? That is the one thing I will continue to like. My craw is stuck on. Obviously, I've got a beard here. Many of you see it if you're watching this on YouTube. I don't get what makes a beard not okay under BYU standards, but nonetheless, it is what it is. Do I think it's going to make a major change in any way, shape, or form for BYU football or BYU athletics as a whole? Honestly, not really. Athletes who are willing to adhere to the honor code are already knowing what it is, at least in some form or fashion, or they're going to get caught up on it real quick, and they're going to come to BYU not in spite of the honor code. They're going to come to BYU in many respects because they like the fact that it helps them kind of focus on just their sport. We're going to talk with a guy coming up here in just a little bit in Jackson Bowers. I had a great conversation with him. I actually got lost in the shuffle. I actually found it literally minutes before I started recording this podcast. So I got to get this out to the masses so they can meet BYU's new hotshot 4-star freshman. But he'll talk a little bit about what BYU means to him. And just the thing about this is there are a number of athletes out there, and they're members of the BYU football program. I'm not going to name them because it's been stuff that's been off the record, who have told me the reason why they ultimately came to BYU is because of they like the fact that did not have as many off the field distractions. They come to BYU, they can focus on school, they can focus on their sports, and they don't have everything else that college life can entail all around them. Now, can you find the trouble? Can you find all that stuff that you want to find at BYU? Absolutely. If you want to go looking for it, you absolutely can find it. I can speak from experience, just knowing that that if you want to find it, you can find it. But the thing is, it's a university that aspires to be different than other universities, and it is different than other universities. It's a church-sponsored institution. They adhere to the honor code. Athletes come to BYU and have to sign that honor code just like every other student, every other employee that come to BYU. You have to adhere to those standards, and they will uphold those standards as well. So, yeah, clarification of the rules, great. BYU Idaho gets to wear shorts, fantastic. But Ethan, I don't think it has, as you asked, you said it will have any major impact on BYU athletics and their recruiting. I don't think so. Could I be wrong about that? Sure. Are they going to allow guys to have dreads playing football for BYU flowing out of the back of their helmet? I don't know. I don't think so. I just, knowing how BYU operates, it seems like they put one rule out there, get some feedback on it, and then change it almost as quickly as they put the original rule out. So we'll see what happens. But very interesting times. But yeah, just two very interesting things that came up on a Thursday. Obviously, like I said, Kalani Sitake is not going anywhere. And the honor code, it's still there, folks. It's still going to be enforced. And they're just clarifying some language and apparently trying to just kind of get BYU Hawaii, BYU Idaho, as well as Brigham Young University, the flagship school in Provo, kind of on an equal footing and make sure everything's kind of just across the board fairly clear. So hopefully those answers at least those two questions. We got many more to go here on this show. I've got some other good ones cooked up. We'll get to those here in just a moment. First, though, we need to get a word in on our new friends over at GameTime. Of course, if you guys are a big fan of sports, you've been to games. All of us have been there. I've done it, obviously. But if you are stressed out about buying tickets, GameTime is here to guys out. Buying tickets, your favorite event should not be stressful. That's where GameTime steps in. It's the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all the sporting events, music, comedy, and theater events near you as well. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets you want and start getting hyped for the fun that you will have at those events. They have flash deals and last-minute tickets that pop up. They're available just like maybe an hour before or whatever. You can easily find tickets and easy to find and buy those tickets for every kind of event in your area. They have images of the seat views and, more importantly, the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and obviously job loss protection as well. It is the place for last-minute ticket deals. You can get some really, really good deals if you're willing to kind of just wait it out, my friends. But that's the Game Tag guarantee will also guarantee you get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time is going to credit you with 110% of the difference of those tickets. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you expect when you arrive. And they also get your tickets to you in a matter of seconds, 2 taps. And you're set. Think about it. It's just really, really simple. So snag the tickets without the stress with our friends at GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege right now for $20 off your first purchase. It's pretty significant, my friends. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the podcast. Make sure you guys check out the 2-part Ultimate College Football Preview, covering all things on the Big 12. I was part of the Locked On Big 12 preview. Looking forward to the season, obviously. And if you have not checked that out, it's available on this channel as well as every other Locked On Big 12 affiliated channel as well. Really encourage you guys to check that out and just watch it. It's on YouTube as well as wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's dive right back into the mailbag here. First one comes in from Royal B under Sawaro. Did you change your name? I think there, but says after this, Royal Blue Sawaro says, after observing fall camp, have you seen a difference when it comes to the strength and conditioning of the team versus last year? I think I can see some differences in certain guys. Like there are dudes who've absolutely transformed their bodies, but there's a lot of that's individual things. Like Tanner Wall, I bring him up all the time on this podcast because Aaron Roderick pointed it out. I remember watching Tanner in high school, and he was a fantastic player out in the DMV area in Washington, D.C., but came to BYU, came home off of a mission, and like in a year's time, just absolutely transformed his body. And that seems to happen with 2 or 3 guys every year annually. I think it's more of an individual thing in many respects, but a lot of these guys on the BYU football program, particularly I'm talking about like the bigger guys, the linemen, they look more svelte. And they're still gigantic human beings. Caleb Etienne is maybe the biggest human being I've seen in quite some time, but they look different. Now, I think the proof will be in the pudding, as I like to often say, when they get out there on the field and see if the strength and conditioning actually holds up. The other thing about this is BYU is going to play in some pretty humid environments, obviously, and that's going to test their strength and conditioning as well, especially the conditioning part. Are you going to be able to avoid cramping up and that type of stuff? But I have seen some like differences with guys. It's just not been night and day. So I guess there have been some differences. Next one, Nicholas Chadwick, our good friend. Nick says, knowing that BYU breaks our heart each year, what game will they win that BYU shouldn't, and what game will BYU lose that they shouldn't? I will be at the Arkansas game, so I'm hoping that's the game that we win that they should not win. That's a great one right there, Arkansas. I could see that one. Honestly, I think BYU could go in there and shock Arkansas. I think there's a number of BYU players who are highly, highly embarrassed, especially on defense after what happened against Arkansas at LaVell Edwards Stadium last year. That's an easy one. I think that could be, you're not expecting a win there, and you go into Fayetteville and win that game. The one that I could see BYU kind of say choking and yakking up a loss, man, the one that comes to mind is a game like Iowa State, because Iowa State is dealing with all kinds of issues. They're starting quarterback as well as starting running back, who's already, by the way, the running back has already left school voluntarily. The quarterback, Hunter Deckers, is under investigation, both of them for allegedly betting on their own games. That is a game that's got a danger written all over it if you take it too lightly, because there's going to be a number of other players. Iowa State's a Power 5 program, and they're going to have some pride and come into Provo. That's one that BYU cannot afford to take too lightly. Another one that I've got a feeling that BYU might be taking this team a little too lightly is next week. Sam Houston State redshirted a bunch of upperclassmen with the whole idea of getting them ready for this year and their transition to the FBS ranks. I'm not saying that BYU is in imminent danger of losing that game, but they can't think that they're going to come in and just absolutely steamroll Sam Houston State. This is a championship pedigree program from the FCS. Sam Houston won a national title not too long ago. They're the only team outside of South Dakota. It's them and South Dakota State, if I'm not mistaken, are the only two outside of North Dakota State over the past decade who have won national titles at the FCS level. And everybody knows about the Bison, the NDSU. They have been an absolute dynasty. When you're one of the two teams that has been able to knock them off that throne, that's pretty impressive stuff. So keep an eye on Sam Houston State next week. So hopefully that answers your question, Nick, because I do think Arkansas is one that you could go and win. Other one real quick. Oklahoma. You're not expected to win that one, but you're playing. It's a senior night, the only trip Oklahoma likely to ever make to Provo. I can see BYU grinding out a win in that one, obviously, and breaking the hearts of Sooner fans. I just saw this. Nick, I apologize. I probably should have added you to the list. You said, please tell me and Stewart, Mandel, why it's dumb to even consider Kalani Sitake being on the hot seat, even if BYU bottoms out this season. So Nick, you're the fourth person. I apologize. I just saw that pop up. I apologize, but yeah, I think you already got your answer to that question. Our good friend Garrett at SF Garrett says, with Harper receiving a Micah Harper out for the season, and now his replacement Talon Alfrey out for a while, how worried should we be about the strong safety position? Now, the safety positions are almost interchangeable. I'm not necessarily convinced that there's one's a strong safety, one's a free safety. Malik Moore is going to play more that single high look that BYU likes with their safeties under Jay Hill. So he'll be the deep safety, I guess you could call it, free safety for those who want to go with more of the traditional in terms of the identification of the safeties. Yeah, there's concern, obviously. Having your top two guys on a depth chart go down due to injury, it's never easy to absorb that. But I think the BYU, I trust Jay Hill to find an answer for that. And I'm assuming that he's going to plug in. I mentioned this in yesterday's podcast. Keep an eye on guys like Crew Wakely, Tanner Wall. Keep an eye, especially on Ethan Slade, because I was told by people earlier this week that when Talon Alfrey got injured, Ethan Slade was the first guy to come in and actually play the majority of those snaps in relief of him with the first string defense. So Ethan Slade, the former Orem High walk-on, has made just standout play after standout play every time he's been in camp, it feels like, for BYU the past 2 years. Keep an eye on him, and you can't discount what Raider Dumuni brings to the table. He's a former 4-star prospect. As I understand it, he's just the biggest thing for him is understanding the overall scheme, the play calls, that type of stuff with BYU, but his physical tools are absolutely undeniable. So any mixture of those four guys, also Chika Ebenuha, also probably in that mix, who's a freak athlete in his own right, they're going to try out any and all options there to find the answer for that. And maybe it's just simply you have a cast of characters you're rotating a little bit and try and in these first two games against especially Sam Houston State and Southern Utah, you throw them out there and see who responds the best alongside Malik Moore, and then you make a determination of who's going to be the guy. But I think it'll be a cast of characters to find the right answer. And the nice part is you have two, as we like to call them, tune-up games in a way to get that sorted out, hopefully, as you get ready for week 3 going to Arkansas. All right, one final question goes to the basketball realm from our good friend Greg Romano at 201 TDS. Greg says this: with BYU basketball having 2 open scholarships heading into the season, should Mark Pope and the rest of the staff have made a stronger effort, to keep Jake Wallen on the team? In addition, with his friend Jake now a Ute in the Big 12, how long does Colin Chandler remain a Cougar? Now, I think in retrospect, yeah, BYU maybe could have made a little extra push to try and keep Jake Wallen in the fold, but they didn't necessarily know that things were going to go south with Quez Glover. Now, I mentioned this earlier this week on the podcast, talking about Quez Glover and the situation, and I said I would dig into it and see what I could find out with regards to what's going on with that situation. Had some conversations with folks, and there was an incident. I'm not breaking any confidences here because PK, who I work with at KSL Sports Zone, said this on the radio. So I'm not saying anything that he hasn't said. There was an incident between Mark Pope and Quez Glover. There was a disagreement there, and apparently, the way I understand it is there was a difference of understanding of what Quez Glover thought he was getting and what BYU thought they were giving him. Does that make sense? So there was a miscommunication. It sounds like, like in what was being guaranteed, who said what, who told him he was getting what, that type of stuff. There was an incident, and then he ultimately decided to look elsewhere. He re-entered the transfer portal and ultimately landed at Kansas State. Now, a number of you, when I talked about the comments and played those comments from Jerome Tang, the head coach of Kansas State, you guys responded in force saying that, hey, he needs to back off that. He needs to talk to Coach Pope privately. Here's the thing. The way I understand it is that Coach Pope knows that he is up against it. The other thing is there's a number of other people out there on social media who are saying that BYU's collectives, speaking of collectives as a whole, the Royal Blue, Coug Connect, whoever else, Fanbox Nation is out there. I know kind of a new one out there as well. They're saying that they need to do more to help BYU in terms of the recruiting game. I can tell you based on the conversations I had this week that BYU's collectives, all of them, are doing work. They're doing their absolute best to help BYU basketball. So don't think that they're sitting on their hands and trying to actively tear down the BYU basketball, whatever your thought process is. They're doing their best. Ques Glover ultimately, I think, came to BYU and just felt like, you know what, it was in his best interest to look elsewhere. Is he getting more money reportedly from Kansas State than BYU offered him? As I understand it, yes. He is getting paid somewhere north of $200,000, and he very well might be a bench role player for Kansas State this season. So be it. BYU is efforting, though, to make sure that the collective and the overall recruiting aspect of that with NIL is as competitive as they possibly can make it. The other thing about this is that Mark Pope is absolutely going to have to go out and answer for that on the recruiting trail. I talk about this. Perception is not necessarily always reality, but in recruiting, you'll spin it any which way you can to get an advantage over your opponents. And Mark Pope is going to have to battle against that perception moving forward here. Now, one thing that can really, really help in that regard is winning basketball games. And the other thing about this is you mentioned the 2 scholarships. That's the other thing about this. I don't expect BYU to fill either one of those scholarships, at least at this juncture. That's going to leave BYU shorthanded this season. But the thing is, you will be able to go out on the recruiting trail and hopefully find some guys via the transfer portal and bring them in and know that, hey, we've got those open scholarship slots. But to your point, Greg, maybe they should have made a little bit extra effort to bring Jake Wallen in. I don't know much to say about the Colin Chandler situation. I am fully expecting him to be a Cougar at the end of the day. He picked BYU after a really contentious back and forth recruiting process between BYU and Utah. He grew up a Utah guy. We all know that. It was a Utah family, but he ultimately opted to play for Mark Pope and BYU. Until he says he's going elsewhere, I would hold to the faith that he is going to be a BYU Cougar. And I got to say, everything I have seen / heard about Colin Chandler during his high school days indicate to me that he is a program-changing type player, and BYU would do very well to keep him in the fold because he could come in and really be what I think might be the first true NBA caliber prospect the BYU's had in quite some time. I'm not saying the other guys on this roster right now can't necessarily develop into that, but I think that there is a lot of confidence in Colin Chandler's ability to be. We're talking, say, McKelly Wesley, a Travis Hansen. Think of the players who were heading. Obviously, Jimmer Fredette's the A list. He's like the gold standard. But think of those program-changing type players. Colin Chandler very well could be that for BYU, and I'm going to expect that he's a Cougar until I hear otherwise. One other quick thing, Denny asked this. He asked about, have you heard much about Dawson Baker with regards to the overseas trip BYU over there in Europe? I have not, honestly. I've been kind of reading the updates on the scores. BYU finished up their trip actually yesterday with an 84-78 win over KK Split, who's one of the teams there in Croatia. It's actually a really solid win because this is a legitimate pro team there in Croatia. Apparently, they were second in the league behind KK Zadar, who BYU lost to the day before. Solid win for BYU. Jackson Robinson leading the Cougars in scoring once again with 17 points. Fuseni Traore, 13.7 rebounds. Noah Waterman, 10 points, 10 rebounds, a double-double for the Waterman. Trevin Nell, 10 points in his own right. So really good showings for all these players, but I honestly have not heard much about Dawson Baker, but BYU does expect him to make an impact for the Cougars. He's too good of a player coming from UC Irvine, Denny, to not be expected to be a guy that BYU can rely on. But a lot of crazy times on the BYU basketball front. So hopefully I was able to express a little bit of what I learned about the collective side of things and what happened with Ques Glover. It's not ideal, honestly, with the Ques Glover situation because it leaves BYU shorthanded, obviously. It leaves some hurt feelings, I think, on all sides of that. But at the same time, you have to move forward here. And who BYU's got right now, the guys they have on scholarship, that's who they're going to have this season. It just feels like it's just way, way, way too tight of a window to get anybody signed and get them enrolled in school right away. So BYU very well may play their first season as a Big 12 program with 2 vacant scholarship slots. The other thing about this is filling them, by the way, with walk-on players, because BYU has moved into the Big 12, that guarantees that scholarship for however long that athlete is in school. So that's the concern with putting a walk-on scholarship, is you guarantee them for the 2, 3, 4 years, however long they may be playing for the BYU basketball program, if you decide to make that call. We'll see. Traden Christensen, who had a role last year, he might be the most likely of the bunch to get a scholarship of that caliber, but we'll have to kind of wait and see how things kind of pan out. All right. We're going to move along here. We're going to talk some BYU football coming up next. Had a great chat. As I mentioned, it's kind of my bad. I just kind of glossed over it, but I missed an opportunity to play an interview earlier this week that we had sitting in the queue. I've literally been sitting there waiting. Apparently, I just missed it with not Dawson Baker, with Jackson Bowers, BYU tight end, a freshman, a former 4-star prospect. With to that conversation, we'll also round out our look back at all 155 games in BYU's independent run. We finally finished it after 9 months of doing this, roughly. We finally finished it up. The final 2 games of 155 game look back. We'll get to all that as we continue on right here on Locked On Cougars. Now, real quick word on our friends over at UCCU. Learn and Earn is the UCCU mobile banking app that pays your entire family to learn about money. Kids, of course, look to parents to become financially literate, and parents don't always have the answers, and that's where UCCU steps in. Learn and Earn breaks down financial topics into fun, bite-sized educational games like quizzes and trivia. Every time a family member completes a topic, they earn points that can accrue and be redeemed for gift cards to stores like Amazon, Apple, Sephora, Walmart, Nike, and many, many more. There's age-appropriate content for every member of the family, and all of you can compete against one another and track your progress on leaderboards. The best part is Learn and Earn is available inside the UCCU mobile banking app, so play at any time, anywhere. The more you play, the more you earn, and the more you learn, the more you earn. Excuse me, I screwed that up. The more you play, the more you learn, and the more you learn, the more you earn. There we go. Got it right. Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's award-winning Be Money Smart youth banking program, helping teens, youth, and parents have fun while becoming more financially literate together. It's all courtesy of UCCU. Love where you bank. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars a part of your routine, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic Friday. Whenever you hear this, it's going to be a little bit longer edition of the podcast, but nonetheless, a big thank you to all of you for your support of the podcast. All right, time now to let you guys hear a conversation I had with Jackson Bowers. Freshman tight end, a 4-star prospect, comes to BYU by way of Mountain View High School down there in Mesa, Arizona. He is expected to have a role for BYU this year, even though he is very much a young man. BYU really likes his skill set, and without further ado, here you go, Jackson Bowers speaking with myself right here on Locked On Cougars. Jackson, obviously you're a newcomer to the football program, but you've known about this program for a long time. You committed. What's it been like so far in training camp?
Everything that I thought it would be. I mean, just coming here and having all these guys to compete against every day and just being able to get better and see myself just become stronger. It's just been awesome, just being able to have that college experience and just being able to see myself grow from a high school player to a college player.
What did you work on the most from the end of your, senior year in high school to enrolling now?
Just becoming more athletic, and just over time I could see just me being able to jump higher, run faster, and so that's just been my goal, and it's been proven.
Now you come from a program that's got a really rich legacy down there at Mountain View Mesa. Is there a player maybe from the Arizona ranks or anything else that you grew up like idolizing? And there's Cody right there.
This is my man right here. This dude's a great blocker. He's going to be a great tight end for us.
Sir.
He makes big plays, and he has the it factor that he doesn't care who's in front of him. He's going to put him to the ground.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Right
yes, sir.
Thanks, Cody.
Great guy. Yes, sir.
But yeah, is there a tight end you kind of model your game after?
I mean, I like watching crazy players, so I like watching Rob Gronkowski and George Kittle play.
Yeah.
I mean, a player from Mountain View that, tight end Todd Heap. I mean,
super
athletic.
Is it Todd Heap?
Yeah, super athletic tight end. Watched growing up. I mean, I just want to be able to catch the ball like he did. So, yeah, growing up watching him was awesome.
Did you ever work out or have association with John Beck at all?
The first time I met him was when I got up here during the summer. So while the quarterbacks worked out with him, I was able to talk to him, get close to him, see where learn about him and stuff like that. So.
Very cool. What, in terms of your BYU experience so far, what's been your favorite part of Utah? I know that you've probably been to Utah multiple times, but
I mean, right now it's just being able to wake up every day and play football. That's what I love about Utah so much, is being able to wake up and do what I love every day. So.
What do you want to accomplish as a freshman? Do you expect to play?
I want to do the best that I can do because we have a lot of talented guys in my room, and so nothing against them. They're guys that they can do the job just like I can do it. So I mean, I need to work harder if I want to be able to get that opportunity to play. So,
favorite thing about Coach Clark so far?
He made me love football again.
Good.
Yeah.
Because obviously you recruit him. Is he any different now versus what he was on the recruiting trail?
No, I mean he's still as funny. He still brightens up my day every day coming into football. So he made me love football again. So
very cool. Well, Jackson, thank you so much for the time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
There you go. Jackson Bowers, BYU tight end, and Steve Clark helped him fall in love with football again. That's the mark of a good coach right there, by the way. Getting a kid who may have been a little burned out, and obviously these young men, they have been playing that sport at a high level for a very long time. To hear him say that Coach Clark helped him love football again, that's got to go like up on the trophy shelf for a guy like for Steve Clark. And I got to say, Steve Clark is hardly I'm saying Jackson Bowers is hardly the only guy that Steve Clark has probably touched in such a way. And really, really cool to hear that coming from a true freshman who's not been in the program very long, but a big thank you all the same from Jackson Bowers. And he's looking forward to playing his absolute best, as you heard him say, but expect him to have a role this year for the Cougars. He's too good of a player not to see the field for BYU. And if BYU does want to keep his red shirt intact, he can play in up to 4 games and still red shirt. So that's the thing about this. It's kind of a strategic deal as well. All right. On to other topics before we go on today's show. A couple of things here. BYU women's soccer, ranked number 11 in the country, made it 3-0 to start the season with a 2-0 win over Long Beach State. Want to send our best wishes to the Long Beach State midfielder who was taken by ambulance to the hospital after a collision in the box. I apologize. I forgot to write down her name on my rundown here, but a big win for BYU all the same. They will take on their first road trip of the season. They're headed to Boise State tomorrow night. That's a 7:00 Mountain Time start up there in Boise for BYU women's soccer. Expect them to make it 4-0 on the season, but looking forward to that. Obviously, a big win for the Cougars. 2-0. Bella Felino, by the way, becomes the 14th member of BYU's 30-goal club. It's a pretty exclusive group. BYU women's soccer players have scored 30 career goals, and Bella Felino did that. She scored the second of the 2 goals for BYU in their 2-0 shutout of the Beach. Also, BYU women's volleyball, their season starts in earnest today. They're up in Montana, of all places, taking on number 5 Pitt. BYU and the Panthers will square off at 2:00 Mountain Time today. It's at Dahlberg Arena there in Missoula, Montana. It will be streamed live on ESPN+. They will also play 2 more matches tomorrow, one against UT Rio Grande Valley, as well as the host Montana. So BYU ranked 17th in the country to start the season here. So a top 20 showdown to start off this tournament against Pitt, but then obviously opportunities against the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, I think is what they are, and the Montana Grizzlies tomorrow as well. So best of luck to the women's volleyball program. Hopefully they can have a good start to the season, come home 3-0 from that tournament up in Montana. All right, final notes on today's show is our look back. And by the way, it's crazy to think. I started looking back at all 155 games BYU played in their independent era. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was early January when we started doing this. And the goal was to have it just be an off-season long deal to help us get ready for the upcoming season, to look back at the history of BYU's independent run, because they're starting a new era of football, as we all know, in the Big 12 this fall. It was a fun thing to go through because I was able to recall and recount multiple moments of my years covering BYU that coincide a lot my professional career covering the Cougars coincides really with the entire run of independence. So covering all 155 of these games has been really, really fun to do. And today we finish it off. It's no better time to finish it off than the Friday before it's officially game week on Monday, and we really turn our attention to Sam Houston State and obviously the start of the Big 12 era. But let's talk about the final 2 games of the 2022 season. In the regular season finale that year, BYU had bounced back with back-to-back wins, getting to 6-5. They were bowl eligible, and they were headed to Stanford to take on the Cardinal. Now, the Cardinal were way down. David Shaw, as we would find out after this game, was stepping down. He resigned from his position, and obviously a whole new era for Stanford was about to begin. And who, by the way, now that looking at that, crazy to think that they have a new head coach and they don't have a conference right now. the ACC considering picking them up, but they went in this game, speaking of BYU, feeling pretty good about themselves after back-to-back wins, beating Boise State, as we all know, and then obviously blowing out Utah Tech. Coming into this game, BYU is expecting to have a little easier time, but then Stanford decided, you know what, we're going to make things a little more interesting. Now, Tanner McKee ended up 313 yards and 1 touchdown, the former BYU recruit, starting his final game for the Stanford Cardinal. He is now a Philadelphia Eagle. Meanwhile, Jaron Hall ended up 7 of 11 for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. But then Jaron Hall suffered that leg injury, got rolled up on in this game. And Jaron Hall will have a unique distinction in his BYU career, if I'm not mistaken, back for BYU, but having never played in a single bowl game in his BYU career. Crazy scenes, but all the same, that's how it worked out. The other thing about this is once he went down, BYU refused to throw the football. I think Jacob Conover, he had 1 attempt in this game throwing the ball. They went all in on the run. 164 yards in his final regular season game for the Cougars. Hinckley Rapati, 9 carries for 85 yards. Jaron Hall, 69 yards rushing, a touchdown of his own. Puka Nacua added a touchdown as well as Rapati. So BYU ran it 50 times for 358 yards, absolutely just dominating Stanford in this game. 7.2 yards per carry, and just got out of there with the win. A little closer than you would have expected because BYU was up 28-12 at halftime, but Stanford scores 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, make it a little more interesting, but BYU gets out of there with a 35-26 victory, and then shortly thereafter officially accepted their invite to the New Mexico Bowl, where they would face off against the SMU Mustangs. Now, I had the opportunity to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, my first trip, by the way, ever to Albuquerque in my entire life to watch this game. Gotta say, great food there in Albuquerque, but a crazy game. It wasn't necessarily the cleanest game because, as we all know, I'd mentioned that Jaron Hall was injured against Stanford. The question was, is he going to be healthy enough to play in this game? No, he was not, because he had a high ankle sprain, never was able to get the mobility back into it to feel like they were comfortable in clearing him to play football for BYU in this game. So they ultimately turned their attention to Sol-Jay Maiava-Peters as BYU starting quarterback. And things started off pretty auspiciously for BYU in this game. Sol-Jay ended up 7 of 12 for just 47 yards and ended up also leading BYU in rushing with 96 yards and 1 touchdown. BYU just it was absolutely an incredible game. It was 10-7 SMU lead after the first quarter. Then BYU piles up 17 unanswered points to go up 24-10 going into the fourth quarter. But then SMU started figuring things out. Tanner Mordecai ended up 218 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. But the biggest play of the game, many of you will recall it, well, 2 of them. Ben Bywater gets a pick 6 in the fourth quarter. Just absolutely incredible play. He read the quarterback, gets the ball, and off to the races, using his rugby skills he learned as a high schooler and racing to the end zone and getting those points. The other play, Jacob Robinson was one of the finest form tackles you're ever going to see right there on the goal line to preserve a 24-23 lead in BYU's victory to finish their season 8-5 with a 24-23 victory over SMU. Crazy game, crazy scenes, a great road trip, obviously, that I enjoyed. I know a number of you also made the trip down there to Albuquerque, but a big win for BYU wearing those blackout uniforms. Another time they wore those earlier on in the season against Notre Dame, obviously, but I got to give a big tip of the cap to Aaron Roderick. He won a game as an offensive coordinator with a guy who would ultimately, after that game, end up playing running back for him. Obviously in spring ball. Now, Sol-Jay is kind of in purgatory right now. We don't know what his status is going to be moving forward, but for them to win with a quarterback who threw for just 47 yards, absolutely incredible performance. But BYU finishes it off with a 24-23 victory, and obviously goes off into the Big 12. It's been a long project. It's been a fun project. And thank you to all of you who've listened to every episode over the past 8-9 months as he broke down all 155 of those games. It's been an absolute, it's been a labor of love. It's been fun to look back at these games, reading box scores, trying to remember tidbits of my time covering the Cougars and bringing those into the storylines. But BYU finishes it off with a win. Obviously, you go out on top, and now BYU gets ready for the Big 12 era and Sam Houston State beginning next Saturday night. All right, my friends, that is going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. Longer episode. I apologize for that. I typically try to keep them a little bit shorter so you guys don't have to break them up if you're commuting to and from work. But nonetheless, a big thank you for all of your support of the podcast. As always, thank you. Oh, by the way, I just saw this pop up. Robert, I think I already answered your question. You asked about the 2 open scholarships. Is it too late to fill those? Yeah, it is too late. So I'm literally seeing that right as I'm finishing up today's podcast. Robert, Hopefully that answered your question earlier on. I just saw that pop up as I was starting to close up shop. But nonetheless, thank you for all of your support. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, everybody. Thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us here on the podcast. Get ready. Week 0 action tomorrow. Enjoy those games out there. The one over in Dublin between Navy and Notre Dame. There's USC and San Jose State. There's some fun games. Enjoy that. And of course, we'll reconvene on Monday. And it's game week, folks. It is on. We're getting ready for Sam Houston State and get excited for that. This has been also one other thing real quick. I'm way over time, so I might as well just spend some more time talking BYU. Just get ready for it, folks. Crazy times, and we have a player locked in to join us all season long right here on the podcast. We make that announcement on Monday as well. So until then, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast. See ya.